Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Yes, I've got a croaky voice, and yes, I have a selection of RTX 4070 Ti's or 4080 12GB that we're going to take a look at today. Now, I am going to cover a lot of nitty-gritty for you. You can go and see the specs with everybody else, but I am going to talk to you about naming schemes. I'm going to talk to you about pricing. I am going to talk to you about the performance of these three, because they actually do give me a fairly good spectrum across the board with very different pricing as well. So there is a fair amount for us to get in and chew the fat with. The way that I like to do it, and that's like us sitting in a pub as a set of mates and just discussing things. I'm not here to sell you one. I'm not here to tell you not to buy the other. What I am going to try and do is help you make the decision if one might be right for you or whether you want to dodge completely. Now, very early on, there's been a lot of, obviously, drama, hype, hate, whatever you want to put it, in the industry, online, on Facebook, with the fact that this did start out as the 4080 12GB. Now, we did think that calling two cards the 4080 was a mistake at the time. They then backtracked and said that they weren't going to release the 4080 12, and it's turned into the 4070 Ti. Now, I am going to say from the get-go that I personally think that the whole naming scheme for the pack is skewed now because of this. The 4090 sitting at the top where it is, yes, very expensive, but clearly a wonder card that you do need to sell your left kidney and possibly your grandma to be able to buy one, but you need the kind of Goldilocks product at the top, which would have been the Titan in the past. I think when you then go down to the 4080, I personally think the 4080 should have been called the 4080 Ti, and I think this range of cards should have been the normal 4080. And the reason why I say that is because they are going to come in from £799. Now, from £799 means the vanilla gigabyte one that I have here, which isn't the OC model, should be there or thereabouts at retailers. The palette one that I have here is an overclock model, so that one's probably going to cost a little bit more than an MSRP. Maybe maybe 850-ish, 799, 850. Do your maths, Tom. The Strix. Now, I actually found out the buy-in price of this today from a retailer, which probably means that this is going to go retail-wise at around the 950 mark, but depending on where you end up purchasing it from, it could go even further. I do know that the purchase-in price for a retailer for this card is just below £900, just so that you can get an idea of the cost differences between these. So I think we're going to say this is roughly going to be this is going to be about 850, maybe a little bit smidge more, but haven't had a confirmed price. And this is going to be around the 950 mark. And if anything, I think that this one isn't as expensive as I thought it was going to be, because the Strix models have a habit of being very, very much more expensive. Anyway, like I said, I think the naming scheme is skewed, because weirdly, if you were to call this the 4080 at $799, a lot of people would have probably been a little bit more comfortable with it. But the fact it's got a 7 in the naming scheme, and that seems so much more expensive than they were before, that is where a lot of the hatred is coming from. Quite rightly so as well, because it's kind of like they're moving the numbers up, and the 4090 now, the 4070 Ti now performs like this one from the last generation. But it would have been a good thing if it was the 4080 performing like that, as we'll talk about performance in a minute. Now, I am not making excuses for them. I tend to take things like this very personally. much more personally than I should. I probably need therapy for the way that my head deals with things like this and people ruining naming schemes, because I don't like the fact that we all start hating on an industry that brought us all together in the first place. But it does feel a bit wrong with quite a lot of things this generation. Anyway, so we have a broad spectrum of prices. Now, the palette, which is the Gaming Pro one over here. The only thing I don't particularly like about it is the silver backplate, but I do love the cutouts on it. It's actually a very nice card. The RGB on it is a bit simplistic, but it does the job, and it will be, you know, it's going to serve you well. The Gigabyte, they went with the just cut chunks out of the back approach. Plastic shroud on the front, very, very minimal lighting, copper heat pipes. They didn't cover anything up. It is the quintessential get the job done for as cheap as possible kind of approach, but it does give you the spectrum of how short the PCB is on this one. And then we come on to the big granddaddy, like the, you know, kind of like hunchy graphics card, which at first look looks like it should be exactly the same cooler and design as the 4080 and 4090 cards. But in reality, if you put the two together, the 4080 and the 4090 is longer. There is much more heatsink inside the card as well. Now, I don't just mean because the card is longer. I mean, if you look carefully at the fins on the actual heatsink themselves, you can see on the 4070 Ti they're a lot more cut back. You can effectively get your hand in here and see how much smaller the heatsink is. I can put my finger down the end. You can see that they're much more trimmed back here. Whereas with the big fat granddaddy one, you can see there's loads more going on. So it does look definitely the same family, but this one is kind of a skinny kid with puffy clothes on. But obviously it does do the trick. Now, none of these cards suffered with any heat problems or anything like that, which is obviously a big topic in the press at the moment. They were cool, they were calm, they were collected. One of the things that we do kind of need to cover as well is we've obviously had the AMD launch recently, and let's move past the fact that a lot of people are talking about RTX hotspot stuff. Like, I'm not getting into that in this video. But for me, the performance of the XT, the lower end card, was a little bit disappointing compared to the price. You had the XTX, which was £1,000. You had the XT, which was £900, but the price was so close that by the time that a vendor had got their cards and kind of like done anything with them, they were more than a basic XTX, and that really didn't work, and the performance was too close as well for the gap. So I always felt like the XT should have been about 700, maybe £750, and this coming in at 799. Basically, I mean, if we said that was 799 and you made me choose between an XT and this, hands down I would get this. So it actually took Nvidia, it actually took AMD to make the 4070 look good. Kind of a weird way about it, but the XT, like I said, should have been cheaper, and it just makes the 4070 Ti look like a much better prospect, which again you'll see more about in a minute. Now, you'd think that because we have a range of prices, and obviously you've got Big Daddy Strixes, basic Gigabytes, and then overclock models, that you would see a big, broad branch of performance. And with just these three cards in a graph, because Witcher have actually done a massive update where they've added in DLSS 3, frame generation, all of the old results are now completely useless. So these are the only results that we've got tested for the new Witcher at the moment, but we are busy in the background backwards testing those. So you can see there's actually not a great deal between them. And if anything, worryingly, the palette was the weaker of the trio. Now, the palette did at first look like it was going to perform quite well because the clock speeds and the average clock speeds critically were quite strong, but it then sadly didn't filter out into tests. Now, I will bounce a load of graphs at you, and I know people are still saying about the graphs and heads on the side and all of that sort of stuff. We have just been immensely critically busy trying to ready the new website because we have a brand new ground up website coming, and I've also been trying to get the Shedio sorted, which is a new filming spot. Now, this one is staying, but there will be another one. Anyway, so we have lots of performance go up. You'll see that there are some 3090 Ti results in some and not 3090 Ti results in others. That's just because in the others we haven't tested the 3090 Ti on that because the card we had for a very short period of time and then it got moved on to other media. So it's not something that I've been able to backwards test with that one either. I know it's a shocking thing, but not all reviewers get to keep all of the cards. So roughly they do perform about the same as a 3090, and in some titles they can kind of tickle the bum of a 3090 Ti. Now you do need to remember that a 3090 was around the £1,500–1,600 mark, and then the 3090 Ti was kind of well up there as well. I can remember seeing some MSI models that were crazy money, like 2.4, 2.5, 2.6, so 2.6 is in £2,600. So the performance is actually fairly good, and this is why I said at the start that if you called this a 4080 it might not have caused so much offence, because the generational leap isn't as much. But to be fair, it only looks like there's more of a generational leap because you're trying to compare it to the 3070 Ti, but you're now at 4080 money. So you've got a performance leap, but you've also got the price increase as well, which muddies everything. And that is why I said at the start, I think if the pack had all been slightly named differently, yes, the performance different might not have been so much rasterized wise, but it still would have been a nice jump while keeping the names of the card in a familiar place, because that's all it is. We know that things should cost more money at the moment because of stuff that's going on in the market, all the global malarkey, people ramping or turning down production of chip stuff. That, you know, it's a difficult time, and I think they could have gone about it in a slightly better way to have appeased the gamers, which at the moment are feeling a squeeze and panic in many aspects of their lives. So the 4070 Ti actually was made to look better a bit by the 7900 XT. It's also nice to see a broad range of cards available at launch, but not a great deal of difference between them performance-wise. To be clear as well, the Asus one we made sure that we tested in the performance mode. The Gigabyte was tested in the OC mode. We did our best to make sure that you could run these as high as you could. Now with the Asus, you can see that the Asus has the largest PCB of them all. That's where the Gigabyte one ends, that's where the Asus one ends. So it's definitely got a custom PCB rather than following some kind of reference design. This does lead me to believe that you may be able to overclock this one a lot easier than the other ones, but you're always going to be at the limit of the silicon within that you get anyway. It's the silicon lottery. The Asus one, you do also get the GPU tweak software where you can go in and literally just hit OC mode and hit save, and it will do a lot for you. You also, with all of them, get the OC scanner that you can use as well. We test them. Because of short time constraints, I was testing the Gigabyte on Boxing Day. We test them as they come out of the box for a launch thing, and then we look into other stuff later on, because quite often a driver optimization or two changes things anyway, so you don't necessarily need to go like hunting for it right on launch day. The most important thing on launch day is going to be price, and the ones that come in around MSRP or should be MSRP will not hang around for long, and there probably won't be many of them. That is something else to think about as well, because if you are a manufacturer and exactly the same card with a slightly different BIOS is going to make you £60 more on your top end, you're obviously going to stick the OC sticker on one, change it slightly differently and make more margin. That's just business. You're not going to get many of the very vanilla ones. That is something that we just all need to make peace with. The very, very expensive one though, this is the difficult one in the pack. And in reality, with the Strix, you are buying into build quality, you're buying into the whole ecosystem, and I personally think amazing aesthetics. I did a build recently with the limited edition Cosmos 30th anniversary edition, and I'll pop a picture up for you. I'll put a link for you underneath. These things do look beautiful, especially if you put them vertically mounted or on with an adjustable mount like I did in the Cosmos. And the difference between this and the 4090 I used is over £1,000 difference. But performance wise, you know what I mean, are you getting £1,000 extra? That's genuinely going to be down to you. The other thing that I do need to remind you about, and it's not need you to remind you about because I will get henpecked about it, but it is, when in reality, talking about the XT, these do come with all the DLSS 3 options as well. And that is not me being a salesman, but DLSS does work when it's implemented in the games. Many, many more of the games are getting updated as well, like Witcher just has done. And in reality, once you've got DLSS on, the frames jump by about 60%. And you can, and that's when you've got ray tracing on, turn DLSS on, jumps by about 60%. And once you've got frame generation on as well, it can almost double. Can be a bit fuzzy in that game with frame generation on though, so that may be something that you might want to pull back. But adding all that stuff in with the ray tracing has actually made it quite a resource hog, as you've seen with the results that we did with this. So, congratulations if you got to the end. If you did get to the end, we do this weird thing in the comments where we like talk about food stuff, and it's so that people know that they got to the end. Today it's going to be strepsils, and that's a throat lozenge if you're in the States. I don't know whether you get them over there, but I'm obviously a little bit under the weather at the moment. But I've tried to give you many, many sides of the argument for these cards, against these cards, for the pricing, against the pricing, why I think the names could have been done better. There's a lot for you to digest. I know this is going to both annoy certain factors within the industry, but I also think a lot of people are going to be like, well, you might have a point. So we'll see how you guys took it at home. Please remember, you can go to the OC3D website if you would like to go and have a look at all the graphs for these and look into more depth about the performance and the specs and everything that you get from these cards inside the box and all of that sort of stuff. And don't worry, the graphs will be changing soon. Just let me get the website live first and we will get there. I'm working as hard as I can on many different things. I kind of need an octopus or a clone, but that might be a dangerous thing. Can you imagine 2 of me in a video? They'd be like 3 hours long. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, all of that kind of stuff. Mate in a pub, having a pint. I would love a shandy because I'm not going to go full beer at the moment because I don't think the meds would like it. But for now at least, this has been the tiniest one with another video for you out. Ding! Love you, sis. I'm a little teapot.